Hi guys, this is Liz from Creative Life of Liz, and I'm here with a little bit of a different video than what I usually post. I am trying to do my first ever full pad kill using this 12 by 12 paper pad from Recollections. It's called the Spring Posies set, and it has all these gorgeous florals and some like terrariums and stuff like that. And I thought it would be perfect. My sister's actually a plant scientist, and she requested some more thank you cards for her to use for some things related to work, but also just some personal things. So I thought it would be nice for me to make up some cards for her, and while I was at it, I figured I'd just make a pad kill and hopefully gift the rest of the cards as well. So today I'm going to do the first part of my cards, and then I think I'll do the second part as just an addition to this video, so you'll just see it all at once, but I'm going to film it on 2 separate days. Anyway, so this is the pad. It's a hot buy at Michael's. So for this one, the major thing I decided to start out with, I saw a video by Lyric Lover 810, I think is her name, on YouTube, and what she did is she took a single sheet of 12 by 12 paper and she made both a card and an envelope using it. And I'll link that video down below if I can find it again. So she made hers pretty small. I think they were, I don't know, maybe like 3.5 by 2 or something like that, so that she could use other parts of the paper for other things. My goal was to make them as close to A2 size as I could while still fitting into a standard 12 by 12. So what that comes out to is this is a 5.5 by 4 card. It's like a vertical fold, and then the envelope that matches it. So I was able to use a lot of the papers in the paper pack to make these envelopes. I'm not sure what my total count of cards is so far. I'll tell you what my total count is once I've made all the cards, because I still have paper left after this. But I used every page that I could. So all these like solid patterned papers I turn into this. So this ends up 5.5 by 4, and then your square you need to make the envelope is 7 7/8 square. And then I just used like the envelope punch board from We Are Memory Keepers in order to actually like punch and fold this. So 2 of the other sheets that were in the book were cut aparts, and then there were also 2 sheets that were like washi strips, and some of those, some of the strips in there were additional cut aparts. So I started out by using all of those as best I could. So far the only paper I've pulled in other than the actual paper pad itself, including for matting and the card bases, everything, is 1 piece of 6x6 origami paper, just because I wanted to bring in some more of like the blue color that is accented in here. Anyway, so first up, looking at some of the cut aparts that were just like good to go as it was, I just like matted and put them down. I did like a bunch of slightly different designs, but this was pretty much it. I stuck a piece of pattern paper on the inside that kind of coordinated. It didn't always match. Obviously this one does not match. But I thought it still coordinated. And then one of the 12 by 12s, which was actually 2 sheets, was just something that I'm never going to be able to use for card making or really for anything, because I definitely don't need more wall art, that kind of stuff. So I cut that up into little pieces, and I use that to put like spaces for the addresses so that she can mail these if she wants to. So yeah, so I'm just going to flip through all of these quickly. I really love this bunny. It's like gold foiled. This one's also gorgeous. This blue paper in the background is the 1 piece of origami paper I've used so far. This is part of the sheets that was the washi strips, and then this is just one of the scraps that was left over from cutting out the card bases. Same with this one. This is an extra scrap from cutting out the card bases, and then for the mat as well. Oh, and then, all right, so that is just the like plain cut aparts. And then I had 2 sheets that had like this pattern that said Find Beauty in Everything, and then the other corner had a floral pattern. So I managed to cut it such that the Find Beauty in Everything quote was in the extra leftovers. You end up with like a 4 1/8 by 8 like scrap left over when you're doing this. So I actually managed to get the card base and the envelope out of the chunk that just had the florals, which is right here now, and then like the solid like ombre colors, and then the quote was in the remainder. So I cut this one out completely, and then this envelope doesn't need anything on the back, obviously, because it's so light. And then for this one, I didn't cut it out all the way. I just kind of cut it out around a little bit, and it's the same for the envelope. There were also these two sheets that had like a floral pattern that was like the bottom like few inches, and so I managed to get it so that it could be cut out and used for this like for the card, but the envelope itself comes from the rest of the page. Like the pattern only went up like 4 inches, so you can't actually see any of it on the envelope. So the envelope just ends up like this like cloudy pattern. And then I used a scrap of paper, and then this Hello Darling was part of one of the washi strips. So I did that one, and then this one is the same thing. So I have those as well. Next up is the set of cut aparts that I had to do something to. So they had like wide open spaces in them. So I wrote my own sentiments. I used some Kelly Creates small brush tip pens to do that. So I have like this one, which has a little thank you, and it has this cute little bunny with a little bit of foiling. And then I just use a little extra strip just to kind of make the card a little bit more interesting, jazz it up. Here's another one. Oh, this one like should have been in the last stack, I guess. This is another one of those cut aparts, and then I just used some strips here and a little bit of the origami paper for the backer. And then here's this one. So this is part of the reason why I'm like doing this part of the filming now. I made 2 Mother's Day cards, one for my mother and one for my mother-in-law, and they need to be sent out by tomorrow in order to make it on time for Mother's Day. So I need to film this part, even though I'm not going to be done the entire pad kill by tomorrow, obviously. All right, so, and then I tried to like change up the sentiments a little bit, just figuring out what kind of fit in the space well. So like this one says hello. I actually really like how this one turned out. There's like the base layer, and then this other, like these are both, the matting and this background are both scraps from making a card, and then this strip is another scrap that I just kind of went over, and then I put the sentiment on top of that. So I made some of these say hello so that she can, like my sister or whoever I give them to, can use them for something else. This is the other Mother's Day card. I'm probably going to let my husband pick which one he thinks his mom will like better, and I'll send the other one to my mom because I think she'll like both of them. This one I ended up stacking a little scrap and then the matted cut apart on top of each other just to kind of mix up the design a little bit. And then I did a similar design here, but this little skinny strip at the bottom is one of the washi strips. All right, next up is some of the like miscellaneous stuff where I like created, cut apart things and created some sentiments. So this little like white background pattern is cut out of one of the 6x6 that was on one of the other sheets. So I got 2 sheets of 6x6. Some of that is just going to have to be used as like white scraps for backs of cards and things like that. And just like with all the other ones, I've been putting these here. And then I had a few cut aparts that were like lines. And so I threw them on the inside of some of the cards. So then this is just a strip from making one of the cards that I just wrote hello on. And then this is one of the other cut aparts in the other corner. I think it was actually the same cut apart. So if you put these two together, this was like made into a box. Like it was just boxed around it to make a 6x6 cut apart. So I just trimmed it down so that it would fit in the 5.5 tall of the cards. And then this one, this little strip where it says hello was part of a washi strip. And then down here, this is another washi strip. For these, I took this same, like this was part of the same washi strip, this little like cream colored border. And then I just matted it twice. And then I used a really skinny strip that I had you end up with a 1/8 inch wide strip when you cut it the way I did. So I like cut it all the way down at 8 inches and then trim off 1 inch to make the card. And then you trim the rest to, first you turn it sideways and make it 7 7/8. So you end up with a 4 1/8 by 8 leftover box, and then you flip it back and you end up with a 1/8 strip when you cut it off to make the square for the envelope. So it's like 1/8 by 7 7/8. So I just use one of those tiny strips that was actually from the same paper to go along here. So like some of those strips I'm probably going to throw out, but it was nice to be able to use it because it worked out perfectly here. Here's another one from the same washi strip that I just matted and then put a wider mat around. This one I did in the same style, except this pink strip comes from the scraps from a different card than the card that I'm making. This one is that same design, just cut out and then matted. And then these are 2 scraps. So this is from the bottom of making a card, and then this is from something like the leftover part. And then this is the same style. This is that same washi strip, but this one has the floral on it, doing the same thing. And then this one and this one. So I was trying to give like a good variety while still making most of them pretty generic. And then lastly, I had a couple that I ended up just not putting sentiments on at all. So I have this one that just uses 3 of those like little strip scraps, and then this is part of the leftovers that was cut, and then of course the little piece on the inside. And then I have this one, which is 2 matted scraps, and then I use the piece of washi to go across. And I think this one's probably my favorite card I've made at this point. And then this one just has like a solid piece on the inside. All right. So that is what I've made so far. Let me see if I can like get all of these under control. So you can see this is like a pretty big stack already. And I have more to make. So if you stick around for just a minute, you can see how the rest, when I need to use some card bases, turns out. Okay, so it has been a couple of weeks since I filmed the last section of this video, but I am back to cover the rest of this pad kill. So now that I've used up all the paper that had full sheets that I could use to make card bases and envelopes, I'm starting to use other card bases I have. So the next set I did, I used a bunch of colored card bases that I had just left over from a previous project. So I'm going to go through those first. So the first set of these, I just used, this was just a whole piece scrap that I had from making a card base and an envelope. This was just left over, so I just put that on there. And then important to note, I put some scraps of just using the backs of papers or centers of those 12 by 12 pages, things I couldn't really use. I covered both the top and bottom on the inside, and then I have decorative stuff on the inside of a bunch of them. So I made 2 of these because I had 2 pieces left. So that was the first set I made, and then I had a couple 6 by 6 cut aparts that I thought were really cute, but obviously don't fit on an A2 card. So I kind of like cut them apart and finagled them. I did not do this with the second set because it was just like way too much work, so I just pulled what I wanted from that and then used the rest as scraps to use the back side as white paper. But I did this one from one of the 6 by 6 cut aparts, and then I also did this one. And then I wrote in the Hello Darling on this one. So I like how these turned out, but they were definitely a lot of work. So next up, I did a few where I kind of like pulled a bunch of scraps. So I had cut all of the pages that I could use to be card bases, card mats. So this one is 4 by 5 1/4. I pulled as many of those as I could, so I was just kind of trying to build on top of that. So I used this extra scrap to kind of make a center area, and then one of these are like this little scrap here is the 1/8 inch wide scrap from cutting the card bases and envelopes, and then I wrote this for you just on a scrap that I didn't want to use. This is like the back side, and put this down. And I lifted it up a little bit. I don't know if you guys can tell from here, but it's lifted a little bit just using some like leftover scraps that were way too small to do anything real with. Like you get little Let me see if I can find one. You get these little scraps when you're making the envelopes, just to punch the notches. And these are obviously way too small to really do much with, but I did stack some of those underneath this just to kind of lift it up a little bit so I didn't have to use foam squares or something like that. So I made this one like that, and then I made this one. This one I didn't really lift up. And then I just used a bunch of scraps to make this one as well. This was one of the like washi cut apart pages. And then the next set, I kind of just wanted to play with like the little fishtail banners. So I made a bunch that looked like this, and they have various sentiments on them. Trying to be like pretty generic, of course, so that they are usable for a lot of different situations. All right, so those were all the colored card bases. And for those, all of them, even when they were light colored like this, like you could definitely write on this light blue, but I still just put the white on the inside and then decorated it a little bit at the bottom, just to try to make it as easy as possible to write in. Okay, sorry, I just hit my studio lit. So the next set I made this card, just kind of playing around with it. I took a scrap here, and then this tiny white border is one of those 1/8 inch wide scraps just turned upside down. And then I put this little hello banner on here. And I realized it was really cute off-centered, but I thought it would be easier and better if I just made a bunch that were actually centered. So I did that next with as many as I could. So I just had a bunch, and I just wrote a bunch of like generic sentiments, going through, trying to make them, you know, coordinate with the paper. So all of this is just, like, this is a full page mat, and then this is just an extra scrap, and then this is the 1/8 inch wide little scrap turned upside down. So I got a bunch out of this design, basically as many as I could get. I think I finished out the full mats using this design. So next up, I just did a couple kind of like boxy scrap pieces. I made this one and then this one using that design. This is from one of the other 6x6 cut aparts that I couldn't really make work a second time because it was just so much work. So I just used it as like a little banner scrap here, and I think it turned out really cute. Next up, I've seen this card design or variations on it on the Bourbon Creek Crafts YouTube page. So I just made a bunch of these. So these are just scraps that are all the same size that I put fishtails on, and then I use another back of a scrap or from a center of a 12 by 12 like full page border design, and I just cut a little fishtail and wrote a sentiment on it. This one I put a border on as well, and just kind of like meshed all the other pieces together. So I made a bunch of these as well, using basically all the scraps that I could make work out with that. And then I had a few long scraps left, so I just kind of stacked them with a piece of paper, and then these are tiny scraps that I just fussy cut out to kind of add some decoration. And then this was one of my other kind of like let's use up some scraps thing. So I just tried to box as many as I could. I ended up with this tiny gap here, but I think that it's fine. It doesn't really bother me. I feel like it kind of creates a little bit of white space, but I just made it kind of patchwork style, and then I put a couple flags on it as well. And then last, I took every scrap I had left, and the width of the skinniest ones was 3/4 inches, so I cut a ton of little 3/4 inch squares, and I just put them all on a backer piece. Parts of this were like scraps that I couldn't really use for various reasons. Either they were like part of the 6x6 or 12x12 cut aparts, or they just didn't work for other reasons. I made that as a backer, and then just did it like this, and then added a couple of fishtails with a sentiment. And then this is actually cut out of the front cover of the book. And then for this one, to be a base for all of these little squares, I actually cut another chunk of the front cover of the pad that I couldn't use. And then I used a couple of these 1/8 inch wide scraps to kind of make it look like a package, and then I fussy cut out a little butterfly to make it look like the bow. And then this one is also another tiny scrap that came from the front cover when I was cutting it apart to be this background, and then I just used another fishtail here. And then I had 3 tiny, I like dropped things on the floor. I had 3 tiny scraps left, like little white paper. So these would come from like the middle of the 12 by 12. This one came from one of those 6 by 6 cut aparts. So I just wrote who I am giving these to, and then I'll just use a piece of paper to kind of border around all of them and hold them together. I also pulled out a few of like these lovely and free that these came from the like washi or border cut apart page. And then also a couple that say make today beautiful. These 2 cut aparts. Oh, I have a couple more lovely and free ones. These 2 came from the cut apart sheet. And then these 4 also came from cut apart sheets. So I just pulled these out, and I plan to use them for my planner setup for starting in July. I think that these will go with the papers that I picked out, and I feel like they're nice sentiments, but they don't really work very well for cards. So I just pulled these out to the side. And then as I was cutting apart the front page, like the cover of the pad, I don't know why my cat is like freaking out. I pulled out these 2 pieces, which I thought about using in cards, but it didn't really work out. And then there were also these strips. And so I just cut all of these, and I'm just going to give these to my parents as bookmarks because they are constantly losing bookmarks, and they're really cute. So I'm just going to use those for that. So the things I have left are these pieces of the front cover. So basically this is like the bottom, and then this was just describing it. This was the name, and then this was like one of the little scraps that I cut to use as backers, but this scrap was too small. So obviously all of these are going in the recycle. There's not really that much you can do with them. And then this is literally all of my scraps of the paper. Both the 1 sheet of origami paper I used, plus all the entire card pack. So I did not have a lot of waste. I tried to use everything as best I could, but like this, I think is my largest scrap right here. So definitely not a lot of scrap left. So I feel like I used it really well. So all in all, I ended up with 70 cards. A couple of them have already been mailed out because Mother's Day happened, but this is most of the cards. I have these couple of little scraps to use in a future project. I have a stack of bookmarks, and I have the tags to wrap up all the cards. So yeah, that is everything. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe below if you liked it. Comment how you use pad kills and if there's any pads you're really excited to be using. And if you have any questions. And follow me on Instagram. I'm going to hopefully post some more of these cards going forward. Yeah, so thank you so much, and until next time. Bye!